You wondered what the chairs were for. We'll do a little Q&A, so congratulations.
Thank you.
I was in New Orleans right after Katrina with a church group, and we worked doing what we could to first clear away all of the devastation from people's homes and then to start to rebuild. And we did that for many years. When I get depressed about the threats that people face and the impacts that sometimes people live with, when I think about that horrible flooding that we saw on the subway in New York, or you think about the what is it they call it? Daytime flooding or sunny day flooding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm encouraged to be reminded, and it was a great video, it's great to be reminded that there are engineers and others working around the clock on these issues, and that the solutions not only improve quality of life, as you referenced, but there's great economic opportunity. There are jobs in all of this work. So that's not a question, but I just wanted to kind of, rather than start with my scripted questions, that was kind of the first thing I wanted to kind of get you to talk about a little bit, because it is, despite all the challenges we face, it is exciting to see the work that's happening.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely spot on. The work we do gets really value and weight at the moment where you see, unfortunately, the personal suffering, which sometimes actually creates the work we do. So you mentioned New Orleans. I was at COP26 a couple of weeks ago, and lots of conversations about the need to build a more sustainable, more resilient world. But all of these things really come to life in the moment that you see, personal suffering, unfortunately. But engineers are people who, and it's a story probably you've heard before, if you walk a city or you see a piece of infrastructure or you see a coastal protection we design, that is what engineers enjoy doing, and that is what makes them proud when they can point to these particular projects which they contributed to and can proudly share that with family or friends. And indeed, there is already a lot of good work happening as we speak. That is the other thing which occurred to me when I was in Glasgow, that a lot of private initiatives are already taking off. And I think there is clearly an understanding and a recognition that climate change is a real threat and does need that swift action I spoke about before.
Your footprint in the US is enormous. You're doing so much work on climate adaptation and water management. How did you make the transition from that reconnaissance mission you mentioned in your remarks to now being involved from one coast across to the other?
Yeah, I think that probably builds on the spirit Freddie Heineken had, and Fien spoke about it. It wasn't my doing, it was my predecessor's predecessor who actually felt that there was a tremendous opportunity to bring the capabilities and the experiences we had and had already utilized in other parts of the world to the US, and hence the venturing into the US in the early 90s. And it was clearly, I think, seen by the gentleman who ran the company at that time that the US was providing a great opportunity for us to grow, but that the US could also benefit from the pedigree and the experience we had already created elsewhere in the world. Did he at that time expect us to be 6,000 people and growing 30 years later? Most likely not. But it clearly is the innovative spirit and the experience which people brought to the US, experiences which are already gathered elsewhere in the world, which gave us the opportunity to grow as big as we have grown in the meantime. And the experience really matters. We do a lot of work for local clients. The US Army Corps of Engineers is a local client, albeit a very big local client. And anytime I meet with clients anywhere in the world, and most of the time they are local clients, and I ask them what it is we can do better, or what it is which attracted them in selecting Arcadis, it is almost exclusively the ability to tap into the collective knowledge of a global organization. If they weren't interested in that global knowledge, they would most likely hire a local company. They hire a global company in order to benefit from that global experience. So that is how I think we grew the experience, the resource base, our resume in North America by using experiences we have gathered elsewhere in the world and providing the services we're providing to our clients. And of course, they are being valued, and hence the growth we have seen in North America.
It's estimated that constructing and operating buildings accounts for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a challenge there, arguably a responsibility, and to pivot off of what we talked about a moment ago, an opportunity to build and operate buildings in a cleaner, greener manner.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, you're absolutely spot on. The 40% is indeed the total contribution of the built environment. That includes construction as well as operation to CO2 emissions. So significant, very significant, and hence a great opportunity for improvement. And unfortunately, the built environment, which I have been part of for more than 30 years, including my time at Fluor, is a conservative environment, which is both good news and bad news. The bad news is that it's conservative. The good news is that innovation can really make a big impact in the built environment. And it goes without saying that a significant part of the positive contribution to reduce CO2 emission needs to come from the built environment by innovation in construction, by, for instance, using much less concrete than we have done in the past. As a quick side note, we are fortunate enough to, with some partners, develop our new headquarters in Amsterdam. And in fact, that headquarters will likely be built in wood and not concrete anymore. There will be some concrete reinforcement for those of you who are really worried about visiting our wooden headquarters in the future by the time it's finished. But most of the construction will actually be done by using wood. And that is one of the most sustainable ways to actually create a building, not only in construction, but also later on in operation.
I believe there are a couple microphones. Yeah, there's one in the back there and one in the back here. And I'm going to open the floor to questions in a couple minutes. So if you have a question or if one comes to you in the next couple minutes, please don't be shy. I'd love to have you have the opportunity to pose a question in the moments that follow. Can you talk a little bit more about I mean, you made headlines recently with your own pledge, your own commitment, and it was referenced earlier in terms of 2035 and what your goals there are. Can you talk a little bit about how you hope to get there?
Yeah, so for us as a company, we felt that it was absolutely necessary and apparent that we made a statement and that we served as a role model. As you will probably know, the goal is to limit the global warming to ideally 1.5 degrees centigrade and to get to net zero by no later than 2050. We've said we want to go there faster. We want to go to Paris in half the time, by 2035. Now, admittedly, for a company like ours, we have buildings, we travel, we use cars, and we use our resources, of course, to perform the work. It is, in my view, not only necessary, but also doable to actually get to net zero by 2035. The biggest impact we can create is not so much in reducing our CO2 footprint, that is a big impact, but the much bigger impact we can create is by working with our clients. And if you are a client, and we have lots of clients who have a lot of operational assets, then to get to net zero in half the time is much more of a challenge. But companies do increasingly recognize that they also need to contribute, so increasingly companies are making net zero commitments. And this is actually where we have an opportunity to help other companies to get to net zero, ideally in half the time as well. So for us it is a part of what we do ourselves, but the bigger impact is through the work we actually do for our clients. I think it is for us quite doable to get to net zero by 2035.
All of us, I think, most of the people in this room can recall a time when solar panels were rare, when electric vehicles were a concept or something very sort of new and untested. The public's understanding of the issue, I think, has really grown in enormous ways. People have an appreciation for the things they can do that might seem small, but multiplied by all of us can add up. Do you have any thoughts on that evolution and that that change in our collective thinking?
Yeah, I think that evolution is driven, of course, by technological developments, but I think the evolution will be further accelerated by societal pressure. When we launched our new strategy about a year ago, we said that we would be impacted by four large global megatrends, urbanization being one, climate change being one, digitalization being the third, and the last one being societal expectations. And clearly what you do see, and I think the pandemic has actually accelerated this further, is a necessity and a lot of societal pressure and drive to actually take steps much more quickly. And that translates into an acceleration of, for instance, EV. I could have not thought a couple of years ago that I would actually ultimately drive an electric vehicle, and I'm proud to say that I have an electric vehicle and it is really cool. It is actually a really cool way to travel. Now, that being said, you do need the infrastructure to support it. And what we see actually come at us in a really big wave is the drive by lots of companies, some of them known as the larger oil and gas companies, to create EV charging stations. And there's companies with plans for 70,000, and there's also companies with plans for 500,000 in Europe alone. So it is coming at us really fast, and it is absolutely necessary. I think every contribution we can provide ourselves by having an EV car, but also not switching or leaving the lights on unnecessary, all these contributions do matter.
You have clients who are in the fossil fuel industry. That will continue?
Yes, I do get the question quite often, are we saying goodbye to people in the mining industry or people in the oil and gas industry? And the answer is no, but we will make conscious decisions. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If a client would ask us to provide engineering and design for a coal-fired power plant, or if a client would want us to help them design an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, we will say no. But if the same client would say, I have a refinery which is being shut down and I need help with remediating the soil, and we have the capability, then I can certainly argue that that would be a really good service to provide to ultimately make that land available for use, and also ensuring, for instance, that the drinking water which is being used is not being poisoned. So clearly we will make choices. We also said in September when we had a sustainability day that certain projects we will not do anymore, which was extremely well received by our own employees, but believe it or not, extremely well received by our shareholders as well, who thought that making clear choices is what the world actually needs.
This is a great time. I have a couple more questions, but I did want to open the floor. Yes?
If I might, I'm Congressman Garrett. I represent I'm Congressman Garrett. I represent the Sacramento Valley of California and the Delta of Sacramento. When I heard about Holland on the Hill and about the Heineken Award, I go, this is hometown stuff for us. Much of the Delta is similar to problems to much of Holland. And it turns out that one of our dear friends is the Van Lobenso family. They came there in the the mid-1800s, and began building levees and dikes, some of which you're probably familiar with. And so your current work, in which you are involved with the Army Corps of Engineers, is hometown to me. We've got 1,500 miles of levees, and we occasionally have problems, and we count on the work repairing and dealing with the reality of those. Also, Heineken. There's a certain brewery in my district that is now owned by a certain Dutch company. And so this is all hometown stuff. And you're also talking about things that are really important. You talked about your work with the American military. We have a hearing tomorrow on energy consumption. The American military is the single largest unit in the world in the consumption of petroleum products. There's no other single unit that consumes more. We're going to try to reduce that. The built environment, you're talking about things that we need to do, and I know that your company is a leader in dealing with these crises. I'm absolutely delighted you're going to go to net zero. If you can talk to our friends over in the Senate. I use that word with caution. But we need to really do it. We're looking at a $500 billion effort in the Build Back Better on climate change. It is, if we're successful in getting it in place, it will be the single largest effort by any country in this world to deal with climate change. And much of what you talked about, from solar panels to climate to the built environment. And by the way, we are going to invent a new cement. And when you talk about that timber, you can go 16 stories high with wood products now. The laminated, cross-laminated timbers. So congratulations to you. Congratulations on this award. Thank you to Holland and to Heineken and my local brewery. So thank you so very much and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else before I ask about the climate? Yes, please.
Paul Tonko. I represent the capital region of New York. I'm an engineer serving in Congress, voted for both infrastructure bills. And I want to congratulate you on the Heineken Award and the Arcadia team. The vision that you provided is outstanding. Thank you for your corporate leadership. We've lost precious time by being a climate denial government for a while. What advice would you give to those who suggest that America posed to combat climate change is going to fall behind in the economic sweepstakes, and she will be non-competitive in the global marketplace?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of answers I can provide. Generally people tend to talk about climate change as, and particularly the deniers, although I think that part of the population is quickly reducing, thank God, as a challenge as opposed to an opportunity. And if we start to see it as an opportunity, and there's lots of evidence and there's lots of data already provided about the tremendous opportunity solving climate change, both adaptation and mitigation will create. If people embrace the opportunity as opposed to the challenge, let alone moving away from denying that whole issue, then I think we'll make a big step forward. I'll also say that, and I spoke about it real quick, the societal pressure will mount. I saw evidence while I was in Glasgow 3 weeks ago, in many different forms. Lots of people being extremely passionate and telling us, leaders in the world, to speed up. And I was actually personally subjected to some of that protest as well. I mentioned that I serve on the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the executive committee, and that's a body which is really trying to drive the sustainability agenda. And we had organized a dinner on the Monday night, and Extension Rebellion, which is one of the more active protest groups, found out that we had that dinner, and thought, well, a couple of CEOs coming together, those are evil people, so we better make sure that we are there. And some of them actually glued themselves to the front door, which prevented us from actually accessing our own organized dinner. That was a bit of a nuisance, but at the same time, though, I actually understand why these people protest, as strange as it might sound. You could argue about the form the protest takes, but that people are increasingly concerned. I mean, my wife and I, we have 3 daughters, and they're all in their 20s, and they ask me, why do you go on a plane to the US? Well, I said, I'm going on the plane because I want to receive this award, and they get that. But increasingly, we, particularly those of us who care about the future of our children, will get to answer those questions. And we better be ready to answer those questions. If we can't answer those questions, or we don't have the right answer, they will not be very satisfied. And I don't think that will want that on our hands, in addition to the many other challenges we already have.
Did you have a main takeaway from that experience, from the summit, from the coming together, the discussion, whatever the consensus there was, even if it wasn't total or complete? To be honest, I didn't go there being particularly hopeful, because I was, based on all the
news I already received prior to the 2 weeks of COP, hearing lots of issues to be resolved. But I actually came back more hopeful than how I got there. And I became more hopeful while I was there because of the enormous amount of activity which is already happening in the private space. Now, the private space can't do it alone because we do need governments to also pull together. Some people were disappointed about the final agreement on the Sunday morning. I will also put a bit of nuances on that one. Try to get 200 governments or thereabout to be aligned on the trajectory for the next couple of years, with the interest being so vastly different, but the history so vastly different. It is quite easily to argue to the, for instance, Indian government that 2070, which is their commitment to net zero, is inadequate. But if you have a population of 1.4 billion people, many of which don't have access to electricity, as an example, are you going to shut down the coal-fired power plants, or are you going to take care of your people first? So the dilemmas are quite significant. But I was really encouraged by particularly what I saw happening in the private space. I was actually also present in a speech John Kerry delivered, and he got a specific question asked, whether he also recognized that the private space is moving faster than the government space is moving. And he said, yes, I do recognize that, and I would encourage the private space to continue to move fast. Governments will catch up.
You were described a few moments ago as an unsung hero. Is that by design? Are there people in the company who wish that your name was on the tip of everyone's lips? How did that evolve in that manner, where you are sort of an unsung hero on multiple continents?
It's probably a bit too strong. I think, in listening to everything which was said and looking at the video, I couldn't help to be extremely proud of what we as a company do. It is not about what I do. I happen to be the representative who has the opportunity and the privilege here to collect the prize, but it is really what the 28,000 people in our company do every single day. And if there's anything which makes me extremely proud, is what these people deliver, sometimes under extremely difficult circumstances, particularly over the last year and a half. And I couldn't be more happy with my fellow Arcadians. It's not about me; it's about what the 28,000 people in this company do.
Well, I hope we're not spoiling the secret by honoring you today, but we do so nonetheless. And I trust this will fit on the overhead compartment on Amtrak going back. I'm sure they'll find a way. Let's give our honoree, our recipient, thank you very much. It was really interesting. We heard from our closing speaker, Congressman Garrett, who I think had to leave. So it falls to me to say simply thank you very much for coming. Congratulations again and safe travels. I appreciate so much all of you being here today. It's wonderful to be here in person with all of you. Please eat, and please remember to grab one of the parting gifts on the table on your way out. So thank you again all so much, very much for being here today. Great job.